I didn't tell anyone where I was going. That wasn't dramatic. I just didn't think I needed to. It was supposed to be a simple hike in the Appalachian Mountains. The kind of thing people do every day and come back from without a story to tell. I packed light, planned to be back before dark, and left my phone on silent like it wouldn't matter. I was wrong about that part. The morning air was cold enough to bite when I stepped onto the trail. Fog hung low between the trees, thin and pale, curling around the trunks like it had been waiting for me to arrive. Each step sank softly into damp soil, releasing the smell of wet leaves and something older, something deep and earthy that made my chest feel heavy when I breathed it in. At first, it felt peaceful. Birds called overhead, sharp and clear. Somewhere far off, water slid over stone in a slow, steady rhythm. Sunlight filtered down through the canopy in broken pieces, never fully touching the ground. The forest felt quiet in a way that made you want to whisper, even when no one was around. I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed. The trail itself was narrow but well-defined, worn smooth by decades of boots. Roots curled across it like veins. Every few minutes, I passed a trail marker, faded blue paint slashed onto tree bark. Seeing them mattered more than I realized at the time. They were proof that people still came here, that I wasn't alone, even if I wanted to be. I checked my watch. Still early, plenty of time. As I walked, my thoughts began to thin out. The noise I'd brought with me, worries, half-finished arguments, things I didn't want to think about, slowly fell away. There was only the sound of my breathing and the soft crunch of my boots. For the first time in a long while, my mind felt quiet. Too quiet. The deeper I went, the taller the trees became. Their branches tangled overhead, blocking out the sky until the forest felt less like an open space and more like a long, dim hallway. The temperature dropped just enough that I zipped my jacket partway. It felt natural, like the mountains were closing in around me, sealing something shut. I stopped once to drink some water and listened. The birds were still there, but farther apart now. The forest felt patient, not calm, not hostile, just waiting. I couldn't have explained what for, and the thought made me uneasy enough that I pushed it away. I passed another trail marker. This one was older. The blue paint was chipped, cracked at the edges, almost blending into the bark. I brushed my fingers against it without thinking. The tree felt cold beneath my hand. That was the first moment something felt wrong. Not enough to scare me, just enough to notice. I looked ahead, expecting to see the next bend in the trail, the familiar curve of packed dirt leading forward. Instead, the path seemed thinner somehow, less certain. Grass crept in along the edges, like it hadn't been walked on in a while. I told myself trails change. Nature reclaims what people stop paying attention to. Still, I checked my watch again. Time felt strange, like it had stretched without me noticing. I slipped my phone from my pocket, not to check messages, just to feel its weight, to remind myself I could reach someone if I needed to. The screen stayed dark. No notifications. No signal bars. I put it away and kept walking. Looking back, I realized something now that I didn't understand then. That was the last moment the forest let me believe I was alone. I didn't realize I was lost right away. That's the part that still bothers me. There was no moment where I stepped off the trail or made a wrong turn. No sudden panic. No obvious mistake. I just kept walking, convinced that the path ahead would sort itself out like it always does. At first, the changes were subtle. The dirt beneath my boots wasn't as firm anymore. It broke apart in patches, grass pushing through in thin, uneven lines. Roots crossed the trail more frequently, twisting over one another like they had been growing unchecked for a long time. I slowed down without meaning to, my steps becoming more careful. I scanned the trees for the next blue marker. I didn't see one. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes they're spaced farther apart. But the longer I walked without spotting one, the more aware I became of it. I kept my eyes moving, checking trunks on both sides of the trail, then ahead, then behind me. Finally, I found one. It was farther off the path than the others had been, painted onto a tree that leaned slightly away from the trail. The blue slash was faded almost to gray, cracked like dried paint left in the sun too long. It looked older than it should have. I stepped closer and touched it again, the way I had before. The bark felt colder than the air around it. I remember thinking that was strange. I turned back to the trail, meaning to keep going, and that's when I noticed how narrow it had become. Not closed off, just thinner, less certain, like the forest was gently pressing in from both sides. I told myself to stop overthinking it. Still, something tugged at me, a quiet urge to check behind me, just to be sure. I turned around. The trail wasn't there. At first, my brain refused to accept it. I stared at the space where the path should have been, waiting for it to resolve into something familiar. Packed dirt, footprints, a clear line cutting through the undergrowth. There was nothing, only leaves, ferns, twigs lying undisturbed, as if no one had walked through there in years. I took a step backward, then another, my boots rustling loudly through the brush. I turned in a slow circle, my heartbeat picking up with every degree. No trail, anywhere. Every direction looked the same, dense trees, tangled undergrowth, shadows pooling at their bases. Even the light felt wrong, dimmer than it had any right to be. I laughed under my breath. It came out thin and forced. "Okay," I said quietly, like the forest needed reassurance as much as I did. "Okay." I told myself I must have drifted off the path without realizing it. That happens. You get distracted, step around a rock, follow a game trail for a few yards by mistake. All I had to do was backtrack. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening the compass app. The needle spun lazily, never settling in one direction. I shook the phone once, then again, like that might wake it up. Nothing. No signal. No orientation. That was when the unease shifted into something heavier. I picked a direction, any direction, and walked slowly, pushing aside branches, watching the ground carefully. I counted my steps in my head, telling myself I'd turn back after 50 if I didn't find the trail. I reached 50, then 100. I stopped and listened. The forest felt different now. Closer, thicker. The space between the trees seemed tighter, as if the woods had quietly rearranged itself while I wasn't looking. I called out, my voice louder than I meant it to be. "Hello." The sound didn't travel far. It just dropped, like the forest absorbed it. I tried again, calling for anyone who might be nearby. Another hiker. Anyone. Nothing answered. That's when it hit me. Not as panic, but as a cold, steady understanding. I hadn't wandered off the trail. The trail had stopped existing. I stood there longer than I should have, staring into the trees, waiting for the forest to prove me wrong, to give me something familiar. Anything. It didn't. And for the first time since I'd stepped into the mountains, I felt truly alone. I didn't notice the silence right away. That's the strange thing about it. It didn't arrive suddenly. It didn't crash down or announce itself. It just settled, like fog, like something that had always been there and only now decided to make itself known. I was standing still, listening for the trail, for movement, for anything familiar, when I realized I couldn't hear a single bird. No calls overhead, no flutter of wings, no distant chirping tucked somewhere deep in the trees. Nothing. I held my breath without meaning to. The forest felt muted, as if someone had turned the volume down too far. Even the wind was gone. The leaves hung motionless, frozen in place, and the tall trees stood like pillars in a massive, abandoned room. The only sound left was me. My breathing felt loud, embarrassingly loud. Each inhale scraped my throat. Each exhale puffed against the inside of my jacket. When I shifted my weight, the fabric whispered against itself, sharp and out of place. I became painfully aware of how much noise I made just by existing. I started walking again, slower this time. Every step was deliberate, careful. I placed my boots down gently, testing the ground before committing my weight, like the forest might react if I moved too suddenly. The feeling of being watched crept in gradually, not from behind me, not from any one direction. It felt everywhere, as if the trees themselves were paying attention, tracking my movement without needing eyes. I told myself it was just nerves. People get lost all the time. Panic messes with perception. Silence happens in nature. None of this meant anything on its own. Still, my shoulders stayed tense. I picked a direction and stuck with it, using the position of the sun, or what little I could see of it, to keep myself oriented. The light filtering through the canopy had dimmed further, stretching shadows across the forest floor in long, unnatural shapes. The deeper I went, the thicker the trees became. The air felt colder now, heavier. Each breath tasted damp, like rain-soaked earth and old leaves. I wiped my palms against my pants, surprised to find them slick with sweat. Then I heard it. Crunch. The sound came from behind me. I stopped instantly. The sound stopped too. My heart began to pound, hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. I stood there, muscles locked, listening so closely it felt like my skull might split. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. No movement. I waited longer than felt reasonable. When nothing happened, I let out a slow breath and took another step forward. Crunch. The sound came again, unmistakable now. Heavy, deliberate. Not a branch snapping under an animal's foot. Not random movement. It had rhythm. I stopped. It stopped. A chill crawled up my spine. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. Some instinct, older than thought, told me that looking back was a mistake. That whatever was behind me didn't want to be seen yet. I started walking again, faster this time. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. The sound followed. Always the same distance behind me. Never closer. Never farther. Like it was matching my pace perfectly. Testing me. I whispered, "Hello," without meaning to. My voice sounded wrong in the silence. Thin. Fragile. It vanished between the trees almost immediately, swallowed whole. For a long moment, nothing answered. Then I heard something else. Not a voice. Not quite. It sounded like breath being pushed through a shape that didn't know how to make words yet. A low, wet sound, dragged out too long. My stomach twisted. I felt it then, true fear, cold and electric, spreading through my chest. Whatever was behind me wasn't lost. It knew exactly where I was, and it wasn't in any hurry. I kept walking. I didn't know where I was going anymore, but stopping felt worse than moving. As long as my legs were working, as long as I was still putting distance between myself and whatever followed me, I could pretend I was doing something right. The footsteps stayed behind me. Crunch. Pause. crunch. Each step landed with intention, like it was being placed carefully rather than naturally. Not stumbling, not rushing, just measured. I tried to change my pace. I slowed down. So did it. I sped up, my breath growing shallow, my boots hitting the ground harder. The footsteps adjusted immediately, never gaining, never falling back. The distance between us felt fixed, exact, as if it had decided where it wanted to be and saw no reason to change that. My chest tightened. I told myself to turn around, to confront it, to see what was back there so my imagination would stop running wild. I didn't. Every instinct screamed that whatever was following me didn't want to be seen. Not yet. And something deep in my gut told me that if I looked, if I acknowledged it too soon, I would be giving it permission to do something worse. The forest felt different now. Closer. Heavier. The trees seemed to lean inward, their trunks packed tighter together. Their branches tangled overhead in a way that blocked out what little light remained. Shadows pooled thickly at their bases, dark enough that my eyes refused to settle on them for too long. I swallowed and tried to steady my breathing. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. The sound felt closer now, not because the distance had changed, but because I was paying attention to it, listening too hard, letting it crawl inside my head. I stopped suddenly. The footsteps stopped instantly. The silence that followed was unbearable. I stood there frozen, afraid to even breathe. My ears rang as I strained to hear something. Anything that would explain what was happening. Nothing. Slowly, carefully. I turned my head just enough to look over my shoulder. There was no one there. No shape. No movement. No sign that anything had been walking behind me at all. Just trees. For a brief, dizzying moment, relief washed over me. I almost laughed, almost convinced myself that fear had finally gotten the better of me. Then I felt it. The space behind me felt occupied. Not visually, not physically, but wrong. Like standing with your back inches from a wall you can't see. I turned forward again and started walking, my hands trembling now, fingers numb despite the cold. I whispered to myself as I moved, quiet reassurances I didn't fully believe. It's nothing. You're tired. You're lost. That's all. The forest didn't respond, but something else did. From behind me came a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even a voice. It was an attempt. Air pushed through something that didn't know how to shape it correctly. The sound dragged, stretched, wrong in every possible way. Then it tried again. A fragment of speech. My name. It said it slowly, clumsily, like it had pulled the sound from memory rather than learned it naturally. Each syllable sagged under its own weight. I felt my stomach drop. No animal knows your name. I didn't answer. I didn't run. I just kept walking, tears blurring my vision, every nerve screaming that I was being studied, measured, learned. Behind me, the footsteps resumed. Crunch, pause, crunch, patient, unhurried. Whatever it wasn't chasing me. It was waiting for the right moment. After it said my name, the forest felt smaller. Not physically. There was still space between the trees, but something invisible tightened, like the distance between moments had shrunk. Every second felt heavier than the last, as if time itself was pressing down on me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth had gone dry. My tongue stuck uselessly to the roof of my mouth. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other, forcing my legs to keep moving even as they threatened to lock up beneath me. Behind me, the footsteps continued. Crunch, pause, crunch. The rhythm never changed. It didn't rush me. didn't threaten to close the distance. It didn't need to. It already had my attention completely. Then it spoke again. Not my name this time. A word, or something close to one. It sounded like a fragment pulled from a conversation I'd had earlier. Something I'd muttered under my breath while hiking. The sound was wrong, warped, stretched like it had been dragged through water before reaching my ears. I flinched. It tried again. Another word. Another fragment. Each attempt came a little clearer than the last, like whatever was behind me was adjusting its shape around the sounds, learning how to push air through something that wasn't meant for language. I felt sick. I realized then that it wasn't just copying me. It was listening. Every breath I took, every quiet whisper, every sound I made, it was collecting them, storing them, practicing. The thought sent a shiver through my entire body. I clenched my jaw and forced myself to stay silent. No more words. No more sounds than absolutely necessary. If I wanted to learn, I wouldn't make it easy. The forest darkened. I don't know how else to describe it. The light didn't fade naturally with the sun. It just thinned, like the shadows were thickening, soaking up what little brightness remained. The trees pressed closer together, their trunks blurring into one another at the edges of my vision. My watch said it was still afternoon. I didn't believe it. My breathing came out uneven, loud in the silence. I tried to slow it down, but panic made my chest tighten until each breath felt like work. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. Then I heard it shift. The footsteps changed. They were closer now. Not by much. Just enough that I could hear more detail. The weight behind each step. The faint drag that followed, like something long brushing against the ground. I fought the urge to look. The whispers returned, low and uncertain. Pieces of my voice stitched together incorrectly. Words repeated in the wrong order. Sounds held too long, then cut off too short. It wasn't trying to scare me. That realization terrified me more than anything else. It was trying to communicate, to become something closer to me. My foot caught on a root, and I stumbled, barely managing to stay upright. The momentary noise echoed loudly in the silence. Behind me, the thing paused. For the first time, the footsteps didn't resume immediately. I could feel its attention sharpen. Then it whispered again, clearer now. Too clear. A sentence I remembered saying out loud earlier, near the start of the hike. I should be fine. Hearing my own words come back to me like that, empty, lifeless, wrong, sent a jolt of pure terror through my chest. That was when I understood something I wish I hadn't. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to replace me. My heart began to race out of control. I could feel panic clawing up my throat, threatening to tear loose as a scream. I bit down hard, tasting blood, and forced it back. If I ran, it would learn how I ran. If I screamed, it would learn how I sounded when I was afraid. I walked faster instead, tears burning my eyes, every step taken with the sick certainty that I was being studied, copied, prepared for something I didn't want to imagine. Behind me, the footsteps resumed. Crunch, pause, crunch, and this time, the pause felt deliberate, like it was thinking. I didn't mean to run at first. I just snapped. My legs took over before my mind caught up. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, each beat like a drum of warning. The whispers behind me had stopped, almost, but the silence itself became unbearable, oppressing, suffocating weight that forced me to move faster than I had ever moved in my life. I sprinted. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. The footsteps behind me didn't increase, didn't hesitate. They kept the same pace as mine, impossibly perfect. The distance between us remained constant, like a metronome set to my fear. I stumbled over roots, almost falling face first into the dirt. My hand scraped along the rough bark of a tree as I righted myself. I gasped, choking on air thick with fog and the earthy smell of decay. The forest seemed to shift around me. Paths I had just walked disappeared. Branches blocked what should have been clear passages. The trail twisted, as if the woods themselves were guiding me, or forcing me, toward something. I had no idea where I was, no sense of which way led out. My feet pounded soil, leaves, roots, scrambling for any sign of safety. Then I heard it closer. A low, wet sound. Breath, or something like breath. Something enormous moving just behind me, heavy but fluid. I didn't dare look, but I could feel the presence, stretching across the space I tried to claim as my own. I tried to scream. No sound came. I tripped. My palms scraped along stones and roots. Pain flared, but I didn't stop. I pushed off, sprinting again, legs burning, lungs screaming. Each time I fell, I got back up immediately, driven by a fear that was older than thought itself. The forest reacted to me. Branches seemed to lean and twist, clearing one path just before closing another. Roots shifted where I expected them to be firm, forcing me to step awkwardly, almost lose my balance. Every misstep felt intentional, like the woods were conspiring to test me, stretch my endurance, see how far I could run before I gave up entirely. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. The sound was closer now. Faster. Sharper. I glimpsed a shadow between the trees. Not clearly, not directly, but enough to make my stomach turn. It was tall, its outline wrong. Limbs that bent the wrong way. Or maybe my mind imagined it. My eyes refused to settle on it for more than a heartbeat before the dark blurred again. I kept running. Time didn't exist anymore. I had no idea how long I'd been moving. No sense of minutes or hours. The fog shifted with me, sometimes thickening so I could barely see my hands in front of my face, sometimes thinning so I could see the empty space where the path should have been. Nothing felt real. Nothing felt natural. And then, suddenly, it changed. The footsteps halted for a moment, exactly as I did. I could feel the intelligence behind them, calculating, waiting for me to slip. I stumbled over a fallen log and landed hard on my side. Pain shot through my ribs. I bit down a cry, forcing myself to push up. Something leaned over me. I smelled it then, rot, damp earth, and something metallic, like blood left to sit too long. My skin crawled, my hair stood on end. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I could feel its presence, even though I didn't see it, close enough that my body tensed in anticipation of an attack. Then it stepped back. Crunch. Pause. It was gone, but not really. The sensation remained, pressing, waiting, like the forest had chosen me as its prey. Every nerve screamed that it hadn't left. It never would leave. Not entirely. I didn't stop. I ran until my legs refused to carry me further, until my lungs burned, until the pain in my body matched the fear in my mind, until the forest seemed to relent just enough to let me escape. But I knew it hadn't given up. It was still there, patient, silent, just beyond the edge of sight, and I wasn't safe yet. I collapsed behind a tree, gasping, lungs on fire, arms shaking from the effort of holding myself upright. My vision swam with sweat and tears, and my legs felt like lead, refusing to hold me properly. The forest around me, it was quiet again. Too quiet. Every instinct screamed that wasn't a good thing. I crawled low to the ground, thinking if I stayed close enough to the earth, it might pass me by. The smell hit first, a fetid mix of rot and damp soil that made my stomach churn violently. Then came the sound breath. Slow, wet, heavy. Something enormous was bending down, close enough that I could feel the pressure of its presence on my back without seeing it. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare breathe too loudly. My body was coiled tight, every muscle screaming to run again, but I forced it still. I could hear it sniffing, and with each inhalation, the air seemed to pulse against me, thick and wrong. It tried to make a sound, something guttural, rasping, kind of noise that wasn't meant to leave the throat. A low imitation of a word I had said earlier that morning when I'd muttered to myself, "I'll be fine." I felt it learn me, learn how I moved, how I breathed, how I sounded. The awareness of it, studying me like prey, crushed the rational part of my mind. There was no negotiating, no hiding. Every instinct I had was meaningless against it. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed like this. I couldn't tell. Time itself felt suspended. Then, almost imperceptibly, it leaned back. The pressure lifted, though it didn't fully vanish. I didn't look. I didn't move. I waited, hoping the next step would bring some kind of mercy. I crawled slowly away, careful, dragging myself through underbrush that cut my hands and knees. Each scrape a reminder I was still alive. My boots caught on roots. My palms tore on stones and bark. I didn't care. Pain didn't matter. Only distance did. I could hear it behind me again, moving, patient, waiting. The sound wasn't fast. It was deliberate, calculated, like it was giving me just enough space to survive for now. I stumbled onto a steep incline, hidden behind brush. I slid, rolled, caught myself on jagged rocks. Scrapes and bruises bloomed along my skin, but I kept going. I didn't dare stop. I didn't dare look back. The forest seemed alive in ways I couldn't understand. Paths opened just enough to let me move forward, only to vanish immediately. Every turn of the trail was unpredictable, twisted in ways that shouldn't have been possible. My body screamed to rest, but my mind was gripped in a paralyzing certainty. If I stopped, it would be the end. I finally clawed my way to the top of the slope, chest heaving, bloodied, covered in leaves and mud. I paused for a moment, the forest pressing in around me. Behind me, the footsteps, soft, deliberate, patient, continued, but they didn't follow up the slope. For the first time, I felt a small, fleeting sense of control. I wasn't safe, not by a long shot, but I'd survived a direct encounter. The memory of its presence, the weight of it, the smell, the way it bent down close enough to breathe me in, would follow me forever. The forest didn't let go easily. Even now, I could feel it pressing in, reminding me that nothing I thought I understood about space, about distance, about survival, applied here. Every step forward was borrowed, every breath a gift, and I knew one thing with certainty. It hadn't stopped hunting. It had only paused. I stumbled forward, still bleeding, still exhausted, and then I saw it, a glimmer of silver between the trees. Water, a stream. It wasn't much, but it was something familiar, something natural. I lunged toward it, boots slipping in mud, body shaking so violently I could barely hold myself upright. My hands plunged into the icy water as I tried to steady my breathing. The cold burned through my skin, but it made me feel alive. A reminder that I was still here. Behind me, the footsteps had stopped again. I didn't dare look. I didn't want to see it. I didn't know if it was still waiting, or if it had vanished, but I could feel it, like a shadow in my peripheral vision, a weight in the air, a tension that refused to leave. The stream curved, and I realized it could lead me out. Streams always do. They always carve a path through the forest, cutting through darkness, leading to roads, to life, to people. I forced myself to move along it, step by step, water running over my boots, cold biting my skin. I went. My chest burned. My lungs screamed. My legs trembled. Every part of me wanted to stop, collapse, give in to the fatigue and terror, but I couldn't. Then I heard it, the low, wet, rasping sound again, deeper now, more deliberate. It wasn't following me this time. It was watching, studying, waiting for a mistake. I didn't stop. The trees began to thin as I followed the stream. Sunlight, Real sunlight, started breaking through the canopy. The fog that had hugged the forest floor began to lift. The trail of destruction, the twisted branches, the unnatural shadows, they were fading. I dared a glance behind me. Nothing. The forest had released me, but not completely. The unease remained, crawling beneath my skin like icy fingers. I knew it hadn't left. It had only withdrawn. The stream led me down a slope, the sound of rushing water growing louder. Soon I saw something else, rocks worn smooth, familiar shapes, a sense of direction returning. Civilization, or at least the possibility of it, was near. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse and cry. I did none of those things immediately. I kept moving. Slow, careful, every step measured, every sound I made minimized, every sense alert. Finally, I broke through the last edge of trees. A clearing. Sunlight hit my face fully for the first time in hours, or maybe it had been days. I didn't know. I just knew I had made it out. The stream widened, flowing toward what looked like a road in the distance. I could hear cars, faintly, like a dream, like a promise. I didn't stop until my feet reached solid ground outside the forest, until I could see signs of life that weren't twisted by the forest. Then, and only then, did I let myself fall to my knees. I was alive, but I would never forget. I would never forget the feeling of being studied, the sound of my name, warped and repeated in ways it should never have been. The knowledge that something had walked behind me, learned me, and let me go, only because it was patient. And I knew, deep down, that the forest had not released me forever. It would be waiting, always. I thought I was free. The road appeared before me like a promise, a strip of asphalt cutting through the wilderness, lined with the fading light of late afternoon. I stumbled onto it, boots caked in mud, clothes torn, body shaking violently from exhaustion. My chest heaved. My hands trembled. My vision blurred. I thought the forest had released me. It hadn't. I could feel it, even from the edge of the trees. A presence lingered, a weight in the air, a pull in my mind. Something patient, watching, waiting. It had learned me, remembered me, and though I had escaped, it hadn't forgotten. I started walking along the road, slow and cautious, expecting at any moment to hear the crunch behind me again. But nothing came, only the sound of my own ragged breathing, the distant hum of tires on asphalt, the faint whistle of wind. I kept my phone in my hand this time, desperately checking for signal. It flickered to life. Bars appeared. Messages, missed calls. The world I had left behind was still there, waiting for me, safe in its normalcy. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but my voice caught in my throat. What could I say? That I had been hunted by something in the forest that could mimic my own words, that it had studied me, that it had almost learned me too well. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. The forest lay behind me, dark and silent. The trees looked like nothing more than trees. The fog dissipated. The trail vanished completely. Yet in my mind, every shadow between them still moved. Every whisper I had heard echoed faintly in the corners of my consciousness. I stumbled to a car parked on the side of the road, unlocked, keys inside. My hand shook as I pushed open the door and collapsed into the seat. I couldn't drive yet. I needed a moment to collect myself, to convince myself I had survived, to convince myself that what followed me had stopped. I wiped my face with my sleeve, and that's when I noticed the faintest sound, a whisper, almost too soft to hear. "Welcome back." I froze. No wind, no one around, only the fading memory of the forest and the voice that had followed me from within it. I didn't know if it had followed me out, or if my mind was broken enough to imagine it. I didn't want to know. I started the car. The engine roared, loud and jarring. I drove slowly at first, then faster, letting the wheels carry me away from the edge of the mountains, from the twisted, patient forest that had hunted me. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Shadows stretched across the road. I dared to glance in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Only my own reflection, pale, terrified, alive. But I knew, with a cold certainty, that I would never truly escape it. The forest remembers, and it waits, always.